Thank you for listening to the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays. I'm here with Jay Jones, and this is Text Driven Tuesday.
Yep. Good morning.
I am only hearing out of the right side of my headphones.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I thought it was always doing that. We fixed it for a little bit.
Yeah, I think so, and then it went back. It's a little softer than.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Huh.
Oh well, I can still hear. It still works.
Falling apart.
It is what it is. Yeah, that's all right. Well, here we are, another Monday morning.
Yeah,
for us anyway.
Yep.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, nothing really eventful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the best.
Yeah.
Best ones.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Last week, I started off the podcast by talking about the weather that was supposed to come in Monday night, which didn't. And you started talking about nuclear warfare. Well, of course, Facebook listens into our conversations.
Yeah.
And so this cartoon popped up this last week, so I held on to it for you for today.
It's tailor-made for us?
It is.
Yeah, there it is.
When you see the bright flash of a nuclear explosion, get into the prone position and face the blast. This will ensure that your head disintegrates first, killing you faster.
Oh, man.
They didn't say anything about holding your thumb up first to see how close the blast was.
Yeah. You know what might could work?
What's that?
Hear me out. We all wear packets, right? Like little backpacks.
Uh-huh. A rucksack? Is that?
But it could be smaller, but surprise.
Okay.
It's a paraglider, or it's like a glider,
Okay.
right? So you see the light, and so you know what's coming next is a shockwave. So when the shockwave's coming, you pop that cord, and the actual nuclear blast will fly you away from the danger zone.
Okay.
But then the secret is before it sucks it back in, you got to be on the ground. You got to cut it loose so it gets sucked back.
Mm-hmm.
It could possibly work.
Okay.
Yeah, better than just laying down, I think.
Yeah. You could always get it underneath those old school desks.
Yeah.
Because apparently that's supposed to save you from
Those are magical.
nuclear blast.
They're probably made out of lead back then. School desks made out of lead.
Yeah. Crawl underneath your desk. Did you, growing up, when you had tornado drills, did you go out into the hall and have to
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I wonder, don't you think those long hallways would just become a massive wind tunnel?
That's what I would think.
And then you just get sucked out?
Yeah, looking back, yeah, you would think that this would be the worst possible place for you to.
I guess it's because there are more walls in between you and the outside, so debris.
Yeah, I guess so. But if it tears off the roof, I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of schools have storm shelters now. I would think. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I know that I think they were building some in more.
Yeah.
Well, it's some nice Monday morning thoughts again for everyone.
Yeah, fun. Nice thoughts on your Monday morning. Tuesday drive on your Tuesday
morning drive. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're back in Romans chapter 1. So if you have your Bible, you can turn to Romans chapter 1. We've been slowly working our way through this section on the wrath of God being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness, and so we're back in
Romans.
back in that section. So we'll turn in our Bibles. Yeah. I'll go ahead and do it myself. And we are looking at verses 21 through 23.
Uh-huh. Right. Yes, indeed. So just remember that this is a long section, 118 through 320. Mm-hmm. And in this section, it's the bad news. So Paul's going to explain the gospel and the good news, and he'll condemn universally all mankind, both Gentile, which is the first section, it's chapter 1, and then he'll switch in chapter 2 and he'll look at the Jews. And it's to bring us to the place where every mouth will be stopped. That is, like, no one can give a defense, and no one has an excuse. That the wrath of God is on all people, and so that sets up for Paul his universal way of escape, which is Christ. And so salvation by faith alone will be unpacked, and the gospel will be unpacked after he gives this long indictment. So we're now in 21. Which shifts us into the realm of idolatry.
Okay. Well, let's have you read it, and then we'll jump into discussing.
Okay.
It.
I'll start reading in 18, but we're looking at 21 through 23. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things.
All right. Well, just going down the progressive cycle of human depravity.
Yes.
Right. And so we're talking about idolatry, and you started by talking about the Roman gods.
Yeah.
And we often can think, well, this is something from the past.
Right.
But I came across this over the weekend.
Yeah, you did. You did. It was too late to find its way into the sermon. I don't even know how I would do it.
Yeah, I mean it's a video.
It's
so.
It's super weird too.
So I guess I don't pay attention to the Olympics. We'll watch a little bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
Roland's really big into watching it.
You like the ice. What do they call it? It's like like the bar game where you slide the little thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like the version that's done on ice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's what Roland likes watching.
Yeah,
he's getting really into it.
You scoot the thing and they shave the ice.
But anyway, I guess this is something that they do every year.
I have no idea.
This is the first time that I've seen it. So
I have no idea that they did this. I would have thought I'd heard about it.
I would have thought also, but I don't know. I don't pay that much attention to the Olympics. So they pass the torch.
Yeah.
And they begin in Greece. And they light the torch, and then they carry it to wherever it's being held.
Yeah.
This year it's being held in Paris. So starts in Greece and goes to Paris. Apparently there's a big background in Nazi Germany with the ceremony.
Really?
Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. This is the opening ceremony. This is an actress. So it's not a real. So it's pretend, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's an actress who is playing the role of a Greek priestess, and she actually prays a prayer to Greek gods.
Yeah.
So we'll turn the volume up, and we'll pop up here. And here's the translation. She's going to be doing it in Greek. It says, "Apollo, god of sun, and the idea of light, send your rays and light the sacred torch for the hospitable city of Paris. And you, Zeus, give peace to all peoples on earth and wreath the winners of the sacred race."
That's racial.
I cannot. I always do this. I always mess this up. All right, here we go.
Preceding the torch lighting,
It's like a golf. We're watching golf.
A poem.
He lines up for the putt.
Mater, ο Χρυσοστεφάνων αέθλων, Ολυμπία, δέσποινα Λαθίας, ειν αμάντιες άνδρες, εμπείρις τεκμερώμενοι, παραπηρώνται Διός, αργή κεραύνου, ή την έχει λόγων, ανθρώπων, περιμεωμένων, μεγάλαν αρετάν θυμών λαβήν, των δε μόχθων, Απνοάν, Απόλλωνα, Θεέ του ήλιου και της ιδέας του φωτός, έστειλες τις ακτίνες σου και άναψες την ιερή δάδα για τη φιλόξενη πόλη του Παρισιού και εσύ, Δία, χάρισε ειρήνη σ' όλους τους λαούς της γης και στεφάνωσε τους νικητές του ιερού αγώνα.
All right. It's an actress.
Right.
I guess this is tradition for the beginning of the Olympic Games. It's still really weird.
It's super weird. Yeah.
Still really bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
To be praying to these Greek gods.
Yeah. Yeah. Bizarre.
But even closer to home, we've got pagan groups here in Lawton.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you talked about something that you saw
Right.
online also.
Yeah. Yeah. There's Angie sent me a screenshot of Cash's Facebook page. It's like where people just post whatever, for information. It's like, I'm looking for the best non-Christian church. And then they specify, not male leadership. I worship male and female gods. I also worship nature. So, of course.
You sent it to me, I think.
Did I send you the two
sent
screenshots?
it to me, and the suggestions,
Yeah.
I think, are telling.
The suggestions are very telling. Somebody's church people got on there and were like, come to this church. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of give you the idea of what the average church member around here understands about things.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know that this was that it had grown so much. I knew that there's this resurgence in pagan religions.
Yeah.
I am aware of people here in town who they worship Odin.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize how much it had grown. You had the statistics, what, 130,000 in 2001?
130,000, 2001.
In the U.S.
In the
right?
U.S., and then 1.5 million today. Yeah, according to National Geographic.
Okay.
Yeah, this article. So, for all ranging of pagans and Wiccans to...
How should we define paganism?
Well, I think they define themselves various ways, but I think traditionally what it means is non-Abrahamic religions.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, given that definition, you'd have to put like Hinduism
Right.
under paganism, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's how it's categorized here,
Okay.
but probably it may be included. Maybe. Yeah. So all of the non-monotheistic religions will be classified
As paganism. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But we are seeing the rise of people that are worshiping, like the Norse
Mhm.
gods. Under that video, I was seeing comments from people are like, no one here is believing that anyone's worshiping Zeus and Apollos, and I was just thinking, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if
Oh
there were
yeah.
people that are
Oh yeah.
that are Zeus worshippers.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they got Zeus worshippers here in America.
I think because one of the best comments is Disney owns Thor.
Yeah.
Like I think we've been so influenced by movies, and especially like the Marvel movies where you've got Odin and you've got Thor and you've got Loki, and they talk about Ragnarok, and our culture thinks this is all just made up movie stuff. And I think we're kind of naive to the fact that there are people that actually worship these false deities.
Mm-hmm.
They actually do believe that these these gods exist, and they worship them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think that there's you asked this question yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there this reemergence of why is paganism growing so much?
Well, I think it's pretty well known. So the rise of secular materialism, which is like anti-supernaturalism, Darwinism as well. Like we've gone through since the Enlightenment, and in particular over the past couple hundred years in the West, and amplified even more in the past 100 years, this move away from anything that is supernatural. And so there became this gigantic void for people. But the problem is that because we're spiritual beings, we're not pure material. We're created to be worshipers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a gigantic hole in people's lives, and so they fill that void with paganism. Right? We've kind of, I guess, in the Western mind and thought we left behind our Christian roots because we became enlightened, but oh wow, that leaves us barren, right? We've talked about nihilism and stuff like that before. That leaves a massive hole in my life. I'm completely unsatisfied with everything in the world. I need something spiritual, but we've left Christianity behind. Everybody knows that can't be right. And so they maybe want to get in touch with their history, I think particularly maybe in white people, like I think there's also this is possible that white people have no culture. That we hear that all the time. You have no like history.
Mm-hmm.
You steal from everyone else's. And so I think a reaction to that has been a massive amount of white people going back to their pagan ancestry. And so we see the reemergence of the Nordic gods and like Nordic culture, or druids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I was thinking also how this paganism, it allows for all kinds of sexual immorality.
Oh yeah.
You talked about nature worship. And I mean that even people that would claim to be Christians, we see nature worship just taking off. I mean that's what the whole climate change stuff is.
Yeah.
You listen to John Kerry talk about climate change, and he's a nature worshiper. But then also just for your morality.
Yeah.
Like that. Like there's no there's not strict morality.
Yeah.
Within the paganism, it's kind of like treat your neighbor with respect. Well, if you're
respect nature,
respect nature, respect your neighbor. If you're not hurting someone else, then it's permissible.
Right.
So it seems like
doesn't fit really well with
kinda,
ancient paganism, though.
Yeah,
not a lot of respecting your neighbor going on.
That's true.
In the ancient pagan cultures,
Yeah, I think what you said is so important that we're hardwired to worship.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the most hardcore devoted atheist is still not going to be able to escape worshiping something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we, especially in the the enlightened 21st century West, we think, well, if we're not bowing down to a statue, then we're not worshiping.
Mm-hmm.
But the scriptures are clear. Like we're all worshiping something. I was telling our community group on Sunday afternoon, every sin problem that you've ever experienced, every trial or hardship, every time you've been angry or depressed or anxious, it all just comes down to really at the root, it's a worship issue.
Mm.
Like who or what are you worshiping?
Right.
And so we need to not look at worship just or idolatry just as, well, I don't worship Odin,
Right.
so I'm not an idolater.
Right.
We all we all are idolaters though.
Mm-hmm.
And so your outline for this passage is 3 links in the chain of idolatry. Explain for people that weren't in the church service who didn't listen to the sermon. Explain like where you're getting this, where you're coming from, because I like what you were talking about with the 2 chains.
Right. So in there's a tight link to like the process, I guess, or the what happens. So we ended with suppression of truth and unrighteousness. The truth of God is made evident in general revelation. Everyone knows there is a God internally and externally. You can't suppress that which you don't have. So we suppress it. That's what we do with that truth. But that leads into this cascade event that happens in our minds and our hearts. And so as I'm reading through the text, I keep seeing this. It's almost like he is telling you, how does someone become an idolater? There's a process. So I see them as like these chains, and I was thinking about Romans 8:30, which is called the golden chain of redemption. That's what theologians call it, the golden chain of redemption, which you can see how Paul has tightly linked all of these concepts. Those whom he predestined, he also called. Those whom he called, he also justified. Those whom he justified, he also glorified. And in that context, this is about the security that a believer has in Christ. How can we be secure, not run around wondering, like, is our God like Zeus? Or is he like Odin? Is he going to throw us away like garbage? Is he going to get mad and, like, come down and destroy us? And I don't know what I've done wrong or this or that, or if I pleased him enough. We're secure in our God because he doesn't change and his promises are true. And so there's this golden chain of redemption, which is a chain of God's making. Like he makes the chain, he latches us to himself, so we can know that if we have seen the righteousness of God revealed in Christ and believed on him in faith, we will be glorified. We're going to make it because of God, because of this chain. But it seems there's this chain here, which is a chain of our own making, and it's the chain of idolatry. And so it's linked together in a progression of cascading events that happens, which begins with what we saw last week in the suppression of truth. And that doesn't stop there. Like, you do something else. And what Paul is saying, mankind in general, not just like like people that bow down to statues. Speaking about mankind in general, this is the process that happens when you suppress the truth of the one true and living God, the supreme being of eternal power and divine nature, which transcends all of the created order. When you suppress the truth of him, you do something else. It's not that maybe you do, it's that you do. You do something else.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So 3 links in the chain of idolatry. How are you defining idolatry?
Well, idolatry can be anything from as explicit as exchanging the truth of God for a lie, worshiping the image of a man, or created things, the creation, creeping things, birds, animals, this stuff we typically know as idolatry. But the New Testament expands the idea of idolatry to include anything that would take the place of supremacy in your life over the one true God. So in your thoughts and affections and time, that which dominates your life is your idol. We can see this clearly play out here all around us, in that people are worshipers of themselves and their identities, right?
Yep.
Whoever you are or you feel at any particular time, right, you're going to conform the world around that idea and expect others to conform to that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I know next week we're gonna get into the passage on homosexuality, but there is a tight link between idolatry and homosexuality, and this idea of worshiping self.
Right.
And we see it all in our culture. I mean, the whole transgender movement, the whole gender dysphoria stuff it's all just self worship.
It is.
This is who I feel like I am, and everyone else around me has to conform to that. Yeah,
and all of it is destructive. Like all of these behaviors that are now going to be listed and that we'll talk about in the coming weeks, it's all an inversion of the created order. So the created order is God, which transcends all of everything and is worthy of all glory, honor, and praise for being the creator. But when we exchange him for other things, our life doesn't get better. It just implodes. It just implodes on itself.
Yeah.
And human flourishing is not what occurs. So the exact opposite is what occurs.
Right. All right, well, let's look at the 3 links in the chain of idolatry. And the first link is found in, I guess, the first half of verse 21, the failure to glorify God.
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, we're created to worship. We are created and hardwired by God. We have everything we need to respond to general revelation. We can see, we can perceive the environment, we can understand his eternal power and divine nature has been clearly perceived. And the correct response to that is to honor and glorify. The word here in ESV for honor can also be translated glory. So it's a failure to glorify, to praise, to honor God. And it's not saying that there's something lacking in God, like God's lacking glory, and as humanity around the world praises him, it like fills him up like a gas tank.
Yeah, you I even jotted it down. God needs glory gas.
Yeah, he doesn't need glory gas to be God. Right? He already has it all perfectly. And so what it is it's a acknowledgement. It's the proper response simply to who he is and who he created us to be, which is worshipers. We're created to worship, to honor, and glorify God. So I can't find it now, but it's in Revelation. Worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and praise, for you created all things, and by your will they were created and exist.
Yeah, Revelation 4.
Yep. And that's a statement of God's worthy to be worshipped simply for being who he is. We worship God a lot. Most people probably think we worship God for all the things he's done for us. So we sing about Christ, the incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, and we do sing about him. Israel sings about their rescue from Egypt. So we sing. But also you'll find in the Psalms, and you'll see here in this passage of Revelation, whether God ever does anything for you or not, a single thing, salvifically, he's worthy of your worship simply for being who he is. And that's the first step here, is a failure to do that. It's a failure to honor and to glorify God, to respond to his revelation in the world and in yourself, in your conscience, correctly. So that's the first thing that happens.
So he reveals himself, his invisible attributes, going back to verse 20, his eternal power, his divine nature are clearly perceived in the things that he's made.
Yes.
And instead of responding correctly to that revelation, we suppress that truth. We push it down, and we either minimize God, or we just ignore him altogether.
Yeah. And there's a sin component to it too, because this is one of the evidences put forward as to why we're all guilty. So you can't suppress that which you do not know. He says, although they knew God, right? So we have, I think, a natural impulse to look at the created order and to worship God. But because we're sinful, we don't want to do that. So we suppress it. We're like, okay, God's worthy of worship, but I'm not going to do that. So in order to stop me from having like the natural created instinct, which all of creation has, by the way, except for man, we're like the only ones. We talked about that last week. You got to suppress it. It's like, I'm not going to do that. The suppression can take hold, though. Like, you can become self-deceived and start to believe your own lies, which is usually what happens, right? But there has to be that active suppression and you not doing that which God designed you to do. So I will not worship God. I will not give him the glory and honor and praise he deserves.
Okay.
And so then that leads, I don't know if it leads to, or if it's like it says, like the twin brother, is to unthankfulness.
I was thinking as you were laying out the proper response to God is to worship him for who he is, and I was kind of seeing it as the twins. Like, here's glorifying God is for who he is, giving thanks is for what he's done.
Right.
And we fail to do both things. I mean, this failure to give thanks to him is we're all guilty of that.
Yeah.
Big time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think that part of our sinfulness is that we don't think about it, and we don't treat it as big a deal as it is. And I thought it was really impactful that you were saying that this is like the first step in apostatizing.
Yeah, yeah. You don't apostatize without being unthankful to God. In fact, unthankfulness then will lead into like bitterness and even resentment toward God. A lot of times is how it plays out. It doesn't stop there. And it's a dangerous thing because, like you said, we're all guilty of it. So and I was thinking about, the broad road leads to destruction, narrow road leads to life. So for a Christian to be perpetually unthankful to God is a dangerous sin. It's like having one foot on the broad road that leads to destruction, but it's a downhill road and it's real slick, right? So you're having to counteract it by trying to balance the other way, but you still have a foot in unthankfulness. Meaning that any time you might slip and fall and you might go on this cascade, but it all starts here, failure to honor, to worship, to praise God, and being unthankful to him. So being unthankful all the time is a very dangerous place to be because it leads, as we see, into idolatry.
And I can see how being unthankful is going to exacerbate idolatry. Like, why do you get angry? Well, it's that there's at least a component of being ungrateful. Anger, the simple definition of anger is that it's a response to a perceived wrong. Not necessarily a real wrong, but a perceived wrong. Someone's done something to you, or something has happened that is unwanted, and you respond with anger. But if we were thankful, then our response wouldn't be angry. We would actually have a proper perspective on our situation.
Right.
Same with anxiety. Why are we anxious? We're not thankful. There's at least a component for that. That's something for us to really think about. Like, all the things that God has done for us, how often do we properly acknowledge it?
Right.
And you just started listing things.
Right.
And as you were listing things out loud, I was thinking of my own list.
Yeah.
I mean, we're sitting there able to hear. We're able to hear you talking to us. How often are we thankful for that? We've talked about it here on the podcast. How often are we thankful for our taste buds?
Right.
Like, God didn't have to give us taste buds. Everything could have just tasted exactly the same. We just eat for nourishment, not for enjoyment. But God's given us that ability to actually enjoy eating different kinds of foods.
Yeah, there's no reason speaking evolutionarily, why we need to have this wide range of taste abilities. All you need to know is if something's going to kill you or not.
Right.
That's literally it. You don't need anything else. You need to know you put something in your mouth, that's bad. It's going to kill me. Everything else could just taste like water.
Yeah.
Oh, I ate meat, water. It's good for me,
Yeah.
right? Can eat it. Corn, water, and
Yeah.
give me that pie, more water. Like, so yeah, we're just unthankful all the time for everything. We're unthankful for health.
Yeah.
You think about, like, now some people have ailments, so I want to be careful there. Like, so their life experience may be being sick all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of people, your life experience will be like 99.9% health or minor health problems that don't really impact you in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's your life experience. You just take it for granted every day.
Even for people that have chronic sicknesses, there's much to be thankful for all that God has done. Even as He sustains us through those trials and those difficulties, we grumble and we complain and we are discontent, all because we aren't thankful.
Mm-hmm.
Before you even got up to preach, we were able to sing. I mean, when's the last time that we thank God for the ability to make music,
Mm-hmm.
to enjoy music, to hear the different sounds and the different instruments, and just enjoying the good things that God gives to us.
Right.
And so I can see that you even touched on it when you were talking about the rise of paganism among white people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a culture, and so people are going back to paganism instead of being grateful for where God has put us, the time in which we live, the nation that we live in, the fact that there is a true God who's not like Odin.
Mm-hmm.
He's not like Thor. Why anyone would want to worship Odin or Thor is beyond me. They're terrible.
Right.
Oh, why would anyone want to worship Zeus? Like he's the absolute worst.
Yeah.
He's not a god you worship Zeus because you're afraid of him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the kind of God that we have, and that's not the God who's revealed himself to us. You gotta look around and see the beauty of nature and think, this Zeus made this.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not Zeus's nature. That's not his character.
Right.
Zeus's character is, it's pretty malevolent,
Mm-hmm.
towards humanity.
Right.
But we have a God who loves us and cares for us and is compassionate and gives us all these good things, and we fail to give him thanks.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it is something that we need to think about as Christians. We should live lives of thanksgiving, because if we don't, it's going to lead us down this road to idolatry.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
All right. The second link in the chain, is the corruption of the mind, and that's the rest of verse 21 and verse 22.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. So they don't honor God or give thanks to Him, but they become futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts are darkened. Claiming to be wise, they become fools. So there's the progression, futility in thinking. We are sensory creatures, right? So how we interact with our environment and how we perceive our environment, and we take information in, whether it's through sight or smell or taste or hearing or feeling, that changes our brains. Like, it impacts our brains. So our perception of reality changes our thinking. But something goes wrong as we go down this path of idolatry, when we will not worship and honor God, when we are not thankful to Him. We don't just stay neutral creatures. It's like we become less than human. It really is a dehumanizing. It's a self-inflicted dehumanizing of our own nature, of our own self. I imagine that in the garden, had the fall not taken place, what we would be, a sci-fi person or fantasy author could not even imagine now what we could be with sin not corrupting our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And the word here, futile in thinking, is the word that we get vain or worthless or moronic. But it also carries a connotation of self-deception. So you become a moron, is literally what he says.
Yeah.
You become a moron. You can't think correctly now.
Right.
Jeremiah 2:5 there's a good verse here talking about going into idolatry. So it says, "This says the Lord, what wrong did your fathers find in me? They went far away from me." So there's always the first step, thinking wrongly about God, not worshiping, not honoring him, or giving thanks, right? What fault did they find in me? They went far from me, and they went after worthlessness and became worthless. So you could just substitute in there, they went after that which is moronic and became morons. Literally.
Right.
That's what idolatry is. So our minds are the gateway to our heart. We've talked about it on here a lot, all right? And that's the way you should preach. Engage people's mind so it can affect the heart. The heart is the innermost part of the person, the self, what we would call like the self. When the heart is engaged, the heart, the seat of emotions, like that then manifests in actions. We have it backwards a lot of times in the churches. The goal of many churches is to simply invoke an emotional response. They think if we can get people to have this emotional connection, this emotional response, then that's going to change their behavior. But the whole time, they have forgotten about the mind, right? And the mind seems to be foremost in Paul's thought process. So in Romans 12:2, we're told, when we get to the application portion of this letter, to not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Because it's in the mind is what drives the heart. So the first thing that happens is our mind becomes futile. When we fail to worship and give thanks to God, our thinking then becomes corrupted.
I wanted to unpack that a little bit. I was really tired yesterday, and my mind was already just kind of wondering, and I started really wondering with this part, because I'm trying to become certified as a biblical counselor, and so I'm just saturated with lectures from these biblical counselors, and as we're talking about the heart and we're talking about thoughts, I wanted to maybe unpack it a little bit more to make sure we're defining our terms, because I think the simplest way to understand how we're made up is the outer man, which is our physical body, and the inner man, which is the spiritual part of us. And Jesus talks about how all of our wickedness proceeds from our heart, right? So the inner man, then it flows out into the outer man, what we do. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the relationship between the heart and the mind, and what exactly we're talking about, because we in the West, we talk about the heart differently than what the biblical authors are talking about. Like the heart is the seat of the emotions for us. So we say things like, "I love you with all of my heart." They would have said, "I love you with my kidneys."
Or my bosom.
Yeah, my bosom, or even my bowels.
My bowels,
my
the Philippians.
my guts, right?
He says that in Philippians.
Yeah.
With all my guts.
Yeah. So the idea of our thoughts affecting our heart, are you talking about? Well, I'll just let you kind of unpack that. What are make it a little clearer for me, I guess.
Okay.
Exactly what. Because we suppress the truth, and that's already something that we do because of our wicked hearts, our inner person,
right?
But then, how is that connected to our thoughts? Am I making any sense at all?
Yeah, I think so.
It's Monday morning. I'm trying to formulate my thoughts myself.
Well, the two are tightly interconnected, but I suppose you could pretend you don't have any sensory perceptions at all, right? You're the guy in that Metallica video that lost everything in the war, and now he's just a shell of a human. He can't hear, he can't talk, right? He can't see.
Mm-hmm.
It's just black.
Right.
Blackness imprisoning me,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
But imagine that's your whole life experience. You've never experienced the world at all in any capacity. Well, we know that we're still born in sin. So we're born with a fallen heart.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens, there are degrees, I think, of what we can see as this text unfolds to what happens to a person. So the evidence is laid forward in this fashion, that given our sensory perceptions and given that creation exists, we ought to perceive reality a certain way. And we don't have an excuse for not doing so.
Mm-hmm.
We ought to perceive the reality, and that should invoke us to praise and worship and honor and glorify God. And we don't do that. We suppress the truth in unrighteousness. We then start to formulate our own perceptions of reality, which will help us to justify our behavior. When we do that, it doesn't just do nothing. It further hardens our heart into darkness.
Yeah.
Like there's degrees of darkness, right?
Right.
Like there are people out there who are non-believers that are still dead in their trespasses and sins. But we would look at them and say, okay, well, they're somewhat of a moral person and they're not a bad citizen. However, there are degrees to which the darkness can take hold, right? And now you've ended up in a culture which practices human sacrifice.
Mm.
So that happens as we continually suppress the truth and we become futile in our thinking and we start to perceive reality for ourselves and how it is and justify our actions, our behaviors, which then further darkens our heart, and our hearts grow even colder and harder to God.
Yeah.
Which then manifests itself in further actions,
Right.
which we will perceive those actions and justify them. So it's like a loop. It's almost like a continuous feedback loop.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's what that's almost exactly how I was thinking of it.
Yeah.
This just continual cycle of just, and it, as we go through Romans 1, it just spirals down into further and further depravity. It's and I think that this idea is it's a warning for how much we trust the unbelieving world to offer solutions to spiritual problems. So I'm thinking especially of like psychology, and there's so many different ways, different models of like counseling,
Right.
and I think that Romans 1 gives us this warning. The unbelieving world can make accurate observations about the world. They can see like, well, this happens, and so this is happening. But when they start to try to evaluate, interpret it, try to give solutions, they can stray because they're interpreting things wrong because of they're suppressing the truth, and their thoughts are darkened.
I can give you the perfect example of how this plays out.
Sure, yeah.
All right. The World War II generation, the greatest generation, our grandparents. They go, they deploy, and they see a high intensity conflict where many of them saw terrible things. Many of them did things which people would say are terrible things, but justified in a world, a fallen world where there's evil. But they had a whole framework, a theological framework that had influenced their thinking and their minds about things. So whether they were Christians or not, explicitly Christians or not, they were so influenced by the Christian worldview that they had a way to frame the type of terrible things they experienced. So 22 veterans didn't kill themselves every day after World War II. That didn't happen, right? Now, many of them did have problems, right, as you would expect. But they were able to go on to live prosperous lives, and many of them stayed husbands and good fathers and became grandparents and all of that. Now you look at our generation, the generation that was in the 20-year war of Iraq and Afghanistan. They did not have that framework. They were not influenced by that. And so they have all kinds of problems. And many of them will come in and talk to me. Now, my approach to them is probably not the psychological approach, right? I frame it in the Christian worldview. And one of the things I also tell them is there must be people that do the things that you had to do and had to see what you saw. And there's a burden that you have to carry, and somebody's got to carry it because there is evil in the world. But the things that you feel are natural because we aren't designed by God's design in the garden to kill and to destroy each other. But as a result of the fall, the whole created order is messed up. And there are evil people that will literally put children's heads on spikes, right? They do atrocious and terrible things like what we saw happen in Israel this past year, that they did to kids and women and all kinds of stuff. Well, somebody's got to stop them. Right. So to feel a certain way about that is a natural human response. But to frame it in a biblical worldview where we see people like David doing the things he did and obviously having to deal with it, we see he's depressed a lot and things like that of this nature. To tell them what you did could be also interpreted as a noble thing that you bear for society, right? So the problem is, though, in the culture and how the culture views it. So many ancient, even ancient, it's funny the things that people can understand, like Native American tribes, their people would return from war and they would have like a ceremony, a cultural ceremony where their tribe would say like, you did this so we don't have to, and we share in bearing the burden with you, and we're grateful for you. We don't have that anymore, right? They had that in World War II. We don't have it anymore. So what you have now is the answer to it is to throw pills at them.
And that really started with Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the way the soldiers were received back.
They're treated terribly, spit on, called baby killers, all kinds of terrible things. But the answer today, there's even TikTok videos about it. There's a thing called Mill Talk where it's military people on TikTok. And I saw one just the other week. It's military members. Like, I finally went into the VA to get to mental health. It's hard to do for veterans to do that.
Yeah.
I finally went in, and so she goes, the VA answer to mental health. And they started throwing pill bottles at their thing. So they're just zooming past you, right? And it's one pill bottle after another. Yeah. Bam, 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 just throwing pills.
Right.
And so that's psychology's answer to dealing with all of these types of traumas that people experience in their life, is just to put them on psychoactive drugs.
Yeah.
And what do we see? We see 22 veterans kill themselves every day in this country, far exceeding the transgender. Like, we're told we have to conform all of society to how these transgender people view their life, or they'll kill themselves. Well, there is a group of people killing themselves every day. It's not trans people. It's veterans. Yeah. But nobody cares. Nobody cares about that. They won't change society. They won't reevaluate how they deal with them or anything, right? And so the modern day, like, we think we have it figured out, psychology. I think the evidence is all around us.
Yeah.
We're the most drugged, most therapied.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank, and people are worse off.
Right. And we can I mean we can go after like secular psychology, but this is all kinds of I mean, even the medical field. I mean, you see these medical doctors who have gone through medical school, and they should know like just basic human biology, and they're saying things like gender is on a spectrum, and you know, you should have this gender reassignment surgery to match what you think, and all of these things are in the process of idolatry, of suppressing the truth about who God is and what He has done, and the world in which we live under His rule, and they're believing a lie. And so their minds are becoming darkened, and we're seeing the collective mind of our culture become just progressively darker in real time.
Right.
Over the last 10 years, we've seen this cycle of Romans 1 accelerate. And so they're believing these lies, and their minds are becoming darker. And you said in the sermon that as the mind is getting darker, you actually start to believe the lies that are being fed to you, and so you've got really smart people that are believing really, really, really moronic things
Mm-hmm.
about just basic biological facts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see this in that documentary. What is a woman? Did you ever see that?
I never saw the whole thing, but I saw clips.
Well, there's a great clip where he goes to a tribe in Africa,
Mm.
and he asks them like the question, like, "What is a man? What is a woman?" and
Yeah.
stuff. And then he'll tell them like what people believe in the U.S. and they're laughing.
Yeah.
They think it's the stupid like. And so we're not talking about a tribe that's influenced by Christianity. We're just talking about
A pagan tribe.
a pagan tribe,
Right.
and they think this is hilarious.
Mhm.
Like this is stupid.
Yeah.
Right. It goes against nature. Like there's evidence in the created order about like that there is order.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the minds become darker and darker, we just go into all kinds of crazy things.
And what he says is that their foolish hearts are darkened, claiming to be wise. They become morons,
Right.
and it's because of idolatry.
Yeah.
And you read Isaiah chapter 44, and this great passage where Isaiah is just mocking the people of Israel who are worshiping idols,
Right.
because they cut down a tree, and they throw some of the wood on their fire, and they cook over it. They throw some in their fireplace, and they warm themselves. And if there's something left over, they turn it into a god, and they bow down to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And they can't see the lie that's in their own hand.
Yeah.
So they're claiming to be wise, and like
Mhm.
it's obvious to everybody. You just cut this wood down.
Right.
You just made a fire with that wood, and you're heating yourself. And then you had this bright idea to take the same wood that you cut down and use part of it to craft an idol and worship it.
Right.
It's foolishness, right? But claiming to be wise, they become a fool,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what he says. And that's how people, people don't wear magic crystals because they think it's foolish.
Mhm.
They wear them because they think it's wise.
Right.
They think it's beneficial.
I was waiting on you to pull Psalm 115 out.
Yeah.
You didn't pull it out. But
Well,
here it is.
There were many. There are many.
I know.
Someone else asked me in the church, like, "What about this?" I was like, "Look,
I know.
the whole Bible
there's
is this
yeah,
giant interconnected web. I mean, I guess if you guys want a 3-hour sermon, you can get one."
We'll give you 2 turns of the hourglass, Jay.
Yeah.
But Psalm 115, there. Why should the nations say, "Where is their God?" Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. That's the beginning of Romans 1,
Mhm.
where his invisible attributes are put on display. It says, "Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but they do not walk, and they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them, so do all who trust in them."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You become like what you worship.
Yeah.
The next line in the psalm is, "O Israel, trust in the Lord," because this spiritual truth that is real for all of us, whether you're an atheist or not, you become like what you worship, and
Yeah.
we all worship, and so you're going to become like whatever you worship. Don't worship idols, because you're going to become
Mm-hmm.
deaf and blind and dumb, just like these idols. Trust in God so that you become like him.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's done, like claiming to be wise, it's done out of self-professed wisdom. I think this is no more apparent than perhaps in modern atheist movement.
Mhm.
It's so preposterous. But they're the people who think they're the most wise.
Oh yeah.
And they're arrogant in their wisdom.
Well, we watched the Neil Tyson video
Yeah.
last week,
Mm-hmm.
where he thinks that he's just completely destroyed theism.
As I told you, there's a reason that they don't engage with philosophers, right?
Yeah.
Because to be an atheist, you have to believe in the two biggest miracles of all time. So claiming to be wise, to be like, you morons, you believe in a book where there's miracles and there's supernatural things. But the further science advances, they become even more foolish, because what even science is seeing is mathematically and with our formulas, we're almost forced to acknowledge that there are realms beyond our realm that cannot be assessed being the scientific method, but almost that math demands that they be there, right? We'd call that supernatural, which they mock and laugh at.
Right.
So it's beyond the natural of at least what we can test and all of that. But they believe that everything came from nothing.
Yeah.
But it's a contradiction. It's an impossibility. It's literally impossible. So they redefine nothing and turn it into something.
Right.
Or I think the term is abiogenesis. I think that's the term. That life comes from non-life is scientifically impossible.
Right.
But yet they believe it. Their whole theory of Darwinism hinges upon it.
Yeah.
And they've tried for the past 100 years to, that lightning in a bottle test, where they put the prime conditions for even a protein to form, hit it with electricity, nothing.
Even if
you can get nothing.
Even if they had been able to succeed, it just proves theism because they had to set up everything exactly right. They had, there has to be a creator.
Well, we talked about those odds last week with the fine-tuning of the universe.
Right.
But they claiming to be wise become fools because they believe in two of the biggest contradictions ever. So, of course, they never talk about them. But they should be apparent. You should be able to look, as Paul says, at creation and deduce there's a creator of immense power, which transcends all of creation, is outside of creation itself, precedes it all in existence. But they do this out of professed wisdom. You talked about Odin earlier. I think this is one of the stupidest gods to worship of all time. Of all time, right? He's your chief god, but he plucked out his own eye and threw it in a well in hopes of gaining wisdom. Why you worship a god who needs to gain wisdom and knowledge? He's lacking. He's lacking something, so he plucks out an eye, throws it in a well. It's so stupid because you already know, because you're a human being and you have general revelation. There's a supreme God of all knowledge who's never learned anything. So you can have the one supreme being who can never learn anything because he has all wisdom and knowledge, or you can worship this stupid God who needs wisdom, so he cuts his own eye out, throws it in. So he's got to wear an eye patch around forever.
Yeah.
It's so moronic, but it's done out of self-professed wisdom.
But we're guilty of doing this also. Not in worshiping Odin, but by professing to be wise in our own eyes, we suppress the truth of who God is. We don't give him honor. We don't give him thanks, and our minds become darkened. Why do we get so anxious over things? It's because we can't trust God. We're not trusting him. We're not giving him the glory that he deserves for his sovereignty and his wisdom, his goodness towards us, his love. And so we're trying to control. We're trying to control events that are outside of our control. And so we get anxious, and we can be overbearing. We can get angry and depressed when things don't work out the way that we want. But we're subtly trying to live as if we have it all figured out, that we're in control of everything. It's just another form of idolatry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
which leads us to the last link in the chain, the dark exchange.
The dark exchange.
And I was asked at community group, what sci-fi movie have you been watching when you had that point? The dark exchange.
I didn't.
No.
I suppose I was thinking of the opposite of the great exchange.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
that God does for us.
Right.
When we receive the righteousness of Christ by faith. But this exchange, and really idolatry it boils down to this. You're going to exchange the glory of the immortal God for a lesser glory, right? So the immortal of the of the one true God. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. And I think there are two levels, I think, to this exchange. One of them, again, as I said, it's not implicit in the text or explicit in the text. There's one that is explicit, and that is the glory of God here means like the sum total of his perfections, right? Think about what you're giving up when you don't want God anymore. Like the transcendent being outside of time and space, who is immortal, is all powerful, has all power, has all knowledge, is perfect in goodness and love, and you want to give up that glory. You don't want him, which is the greatest thing that you could ever have in your life is God. You want to give him up and you want to exchange him for something else, for cheap knockoffs, for lesser glories.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it always comes down to, whether it's you actually making an owl statue and like worshiping him, or, wearing Thor's hammer around town, right? Like people are doing nowadays. Or you become obsessed with an idea, like maybe marriage. And so your whole life is run by that thing that you need, and you're incomplete without it.
Right.
Or your children. If your whole life becomes your children, like you've made them into idols.
Yeah, the good things that God has given, we make them ultimate reality.
Like work has been turned into an idol,
right.
in our country. Workaholics.
Yeah,
their work is their life. It's everything.
After COVID, it seems like we've turned just not working into an idol.
Yeah.
Yeah. Entertainment.
Yeah, entertainment. So we need to be careful of this, because that's what we're doing. Like when those things become that which dominates our life so much that it's affecting our emotions, our happiness, our joy, what we've done is we've exchanged the glory of God for something lesser, something less.
Yeah, and
lesser glory.
And that's, I mean, you can picture it as in your heart. There, we put up little altars, and we offer sacrifices to these gods. And when the God doesn't fulfill us, the God's unhappy. So we gotta offer it more. Jeremiah, talking in Jeremiah chapter 2, he talking about Israel's idolatry. He says, "Has a nation changed its gods, even though they are no gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked, be utterly desolate, declares the Lord. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water." That's what we do.
Right.
We've done two things. We've exchanged the glory of God, the ultimate source of satisfaction,
Right.
And we've created for ourselves broken jars that don't hold any water. They can never satisfy us.
Yeah, and you can see this particular passage in Jeremiah play out in Jesus' ministry with the woman at the well. Again, the Bible is so interconnected,
right?
And of course, Jesus is aware of all of this, so he perfectly capitalizes on this moment. You've got a woman who's had all of these husbands or all of these men, and she's presented as someone who is kind of ostracized because maybe she's sexually immoral. But Jesus gets to the heart of the problem by saying, if you knew who I was, you would ask me, and I would give you living water, right? And that's really what God is. Like, the greatest good we can have in our life is the glory of God, to behold the glory of God in the face of Christ. And that is a fountain of living water. The Bible ends with that terminology.
Yeah.
If you're thirsty, come and drink of the river of life without price, freely. But we don't we don't want that. And so we try to fill ourselves up with other things, and it's like we're drinking, sand. We're trying to satisfy that which can never satisfy.
It's like having a cup that has a hole bored in the bottom of it, and you keep pouring water into it and expecting to drink something, and it doesn't hold it. It's not gonna be able to bear the weight of satisfying you, because you were created to be satisfied by God alone. And so all of these lesser things that we turn into ultimates are never going to satisfy us. And we're just going to keep pouring more and more water into it, and more effort, more and more of our thoughts and our desires and our actions. And we're just going to wear ourselves out trying to be satisfied by all these other things that are just, they just are not, you're not designed to be satisfied by those things.
And there is like an illogical component to it, but that plays back into the corruption of the mind, the futility of the mind and the heart,
and the ungratefulness. We're trying to be satisfied by the things that God has made instead of being thankful for them and giving Him the honor that He deserves for these things.
Right. Yeah. I had that illustration with the pesos and the dollars. I don't know if it's effective. It was for me, but it's like if you want to talk about the exchange of glory, the glory of God for idols. It's like if someone said, "Here's $1 billion. Here's two choices. I'll give you $1 billion. It's yours. You won't even pay taxes on it. You get it all, or you can take 1 billion pesos."
What's the exchange rate on that?
It's not good. I don't know what it is, but it's not good. Everyone will always choose the dollar because the dollar is worth more.
Yeah.
And it's a no-brainer. But now we're talking about ultimate reality and ultimate things, and you have the option, the glory of God, or worship a reptile.
You know what it's like, Jay? It's like being excited that you won Monopoly because you have all this Monopoly money, and you go out thinking that you're now this multimillionaire.
Yeah.
Because you've got little play money.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it's like. Exchanging the glory for this nothing.
Right.
But that's what
and it's
what
even
idolatry
worse
is.
because of who God is. He's so infinitely better than all of this.
Right.
It's not. I mean, if you had a billion pesos, you still would have money. You'd still have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But with these idols, they're less than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They will leave you completely empty.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how long we want this podcast to get, but we have to mention the golden calf incident.
I think that this exchanging the glory of God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things, I think it's an allusion to Psalm 106. Did you come across that?
I don't know. I read a lot.
Yeah,
I read a lot, and
I've seen a pile of books.
I had a lot of notes as well.
Yeah, I bet.
So,
yeah, it says, and it's about the golden calf.
mm-hmm.
They made a calf in Horeb, Mount Sinai.
Yeah,
worshipped the metal image. They exchanged the glory of God for the image of an ox that eats grass.
Right. Yeah, and this is exactly what happens but it doesn't make sense. You can read that and you go, this does not make sense. It does not compute.
Right.
They were there at the mountain. They heard God's voice. They heard the law come from His mouth. They saw the pillar of fire. They saw God's acts in redemption and Exodus. I mean, they saw physical manifestations of the glory, though without beholding fully the glory. And Moses goes away for 40 days. Like, that's not a long time. And when he comes back down, they're worshiping a golden calf.
Yeah.
And they had apparently some type of drunken orgy. That's what many commentators will say.
Yeah.
So they're engaged not just in like, oh, there's a golden calf. That's the image of the God we want, but they're engaged in full blown like
paganism.
Paganism always has a sexual component, and eventually, I think it gives way to human sacrifice. Always.
Yeah. You got Aaron's lame excuse. You're talking about excuses last week. They gave me their gold, and out came this calf.
Yeah. I was reading one guy.
That's not how it works.
One guy who was writing about it said that Aaron was probably a really poor craftsman, It's not like so. When Moses is up there in the 40 days, he's telling them, "I'm going to give you these men, these craftsmen. I
Right.
put my spirit within them and enabled them, and they're going to make the furnishings for the tabernacle." But Aaron, this is his really poor excuse for trying to be an idol maker. So the guy was like, it probably came out, and it doesn't look like the pictures you think of this pristine golden calf. It's probably like this heap of a monstrosity, right?
Like
Which
derpy golden calf.
yeah, yeah. And so they
like Play-Doh.
like, how does that happen? How do you do that over 40 days?
That makes the story so much better, Jay, to think that they're worshiping like this.
It looks like
lump.
a Play-Doh.
Yeah.
Yeah. A Play-Doh golden calf.
A 2-year-old make this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Which just further reveals, the stupidity of what's
And
happening.
they said, and Aaron tried to say this is Yahweh.
Right.
Like he was trying to rein him in
Yeah.
in a poor way. Like, here's Yahweh who brought you out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, yeah. It's wild. It's wild.
It is. It is. I mean, the more you think about it, the more insane it is that they, just a month previous, had been terrified by the voice of God coming from the mountain.
And he told them, don't make images.
Don't do this.
Don't worship idols.
Yeah. I mean, that story is such a warning of how quickly humanity can just descend into utter madness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like we have not heard the audible voice of God and seen the fire and the smoke and the lightning and felt the ground trembling like Israel did. And we think that we're somehow immune to descending into idolatry.
Yeah. They're forbidden from doing it. I don't think people don't. I don't think realize why is it forbidden to make an image of Yahweh. He forbids it, so it's wrong. But why is it wrong? Well, it's wrong because it's a complete category error. Like, you're trying to take that which is even beyond, like angels, which are created beings, though they live in a supernatural realm and can apparently come into our realm too. But God's not like that. He's completely different from even that. He's completely different from even the created spiritual realm. So how can you take the immortal, the eternal, and put it in an image? You can't do it. It's a lie. You're lying about God. You're bearing false witness about him. So you're bringing God down to the created level. And so that's sinful to do.
I feel like we're going to have to do a free-for-all Friday on the second commandment now, Jay, because we don't have time to talk about images of Jesus right now.
Yeah.
But I know that there's people that have questions.
Yeah.
But definitely no images of the Father,
right,
of God,
right.
What? Do you ever get frustrated by your theology books
or Yahweh?
Like
Yahweh, the Trinity,
right.
The Trinity.
Right. Do you ever get frustrated with your theology books
sure.
that the cover is like a picture of God?
Yeah.
I saw one in your office.
Yeah.
The other day.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. I don't like. And this is these artistic renditions are from like the Christian West.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get to this place where artists felt free to make paintings of God?
Mm-hmm. I have no idea. I don't know.
It's weird.
Yeah. So that's the first explicit way, is to we exchanging the glory of God for lesser glories, even if it's to turn an image of him into or make an image of him. You're still exchanging glory.
Right.
But speaking here of idolatry, it's of exchanging that glory for worship of other created things. But also, there's something that I think that we may deduce theologically about image making, because the first image maker is God.
Mm-hmm.
He makes an image.
Right.
He makes man and woman in his image and likeness, and we read this in the first chapter of the Bible. So there's an image maker.
Mm-hmm.
and he who makes the image is the God. So when we make images, when we create idols, really what it is, whether we know what's going on or not, we're playing God. So we're taking any religion on the face of the earth, right, other than Christianity, comes from man's mind, and it's fashioning either an entire system of religion or something simple as household gods. And what you're doing is now you're in control. You're in the control seat. Now you might create that system, and it may be passed down to children in generations that then worship that thing as supreme and God. But it's man's attempt to control God and to play God and to be in the control seat. I think that's one of the explicit spits in the face of the Creator.
It also shows the self-destructive nature of idolatry, because we're made in the image of God, and we exchange the position that humanity has in creation and start worshiping lesser things.
Right.
So it shows that we're exchanging our own glory, our own honor that God has bestowed on us for lesser things.
Yeah, that's right. And the whole role reversal plays out in the first 3 chapters of Genesis.
Right.
They listen to the serpent
Yep.
rather than rule over him.
Right.
The ordering of male and female is even flipped. All of that. I sent you that meme where it was like in the Garden of Eden, and it's like Satan tells man, "Eat this fruit, and you'll be like God." And then did you see it?
I think so.
It was that dog, and it's the one that's looking back and
Oh,
forth
yeah,
and says, then why don't you eat it?
Yeah.
That'd have been a better way to go about it. You first.
Yeah, you first.
Let's see what happens to you. But yeah, it is. We're created to rule over creation and all of the created things, and then it's like us submitting to a bull. Like
Right.
they walk around and eat and poop. And then we chop them up and eat them. But then they become the object of your worship. It's preposterous.
Right.
Ridiculous. So yeah, the whole created.
We're even worse. We're even worse. We laugh at people that are worshiping statues, and then we carry around our God in our pocket. I was expressing my frustration the other night with Julia. I said I was trying to read, and my phone kept buzzing. And I told her I just want to throw this thing across the room.
Just put it on silent.
But what we do is we worship this, and when our God buzzes, you got to answer.
Yeah.
Right. And we do it with so many inanimate objects. We're no better than the pagan tribes in the middle of the jungle that bow down to a rock.
Yeah. So that, once you've done this, you exchange the glory of God, the immortal God, for lesser glory. Like you're in chains. And this is evidence that's brought forth by God through Paul to indict humanity. You're guilty before God. The wrath of God is justified against you. And the only way out of this is to behold the image of the immortal. That's really the answer. It's like God's condescension, almost, if you think about it. It's almost like he's like, okay, you want an image? I'll give you an image. I'll give you the real thing. And so Jesus Christ comes in the flesh. People saw him. People saw the immortal,
right,
in a human body. Should blow your mind. It's like get to the doctrine of Christ. People don't think of him rightly. The eternal nature was present in Christ. One who transcends the universe itself in a human. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, we're told, the preeminence of Christ. For by him all things were created. So we talked about the created order revealing the glory of God and how we should respond to that in worship. That was and is still housed in a human being. So to break the chains of idolatry, the only thing that can break it is the image of God.
Hmm.
Like when you behold the glory of God in the face of Christ, then your chains are broken.
Hmm.
And so gets back to this necessity that the wrath of God is revealed, but also remember he told us the righteousness of God is revealed now.
Right.
And this will make way for the gospel. If you walk through someone the absolute ridiculousness of idolatry and how it's enslaved them, but then you're able to present to them the image of the one true and living God in Christ that can set them free from these chains.
Yeah. It's a big biblical theology of image.
Yeah.
There, because everything's made for Him.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're made in the image of God, we're really in preparation for the image to come.
Right.
Right. And that's what makes our sin so terrible is we're supposed to image Him. We're supposed to be like mirror. You use the idea of the prism.
Right.
We're supposed to. I always use a mirror. Creation's supposed to look at us and see a reflection of who God is.
Right.
Right.
And,
but through our sin, we're a marred image, and so we still image God, but it's a distorted image.
Right.
And now creation looks at us and sees a distorted image of God, and that's what makes our sin so heinous.
And we'll be called later in Romans and told that we're being conformed into His image.
Right.
So it's like He's repairing and making us to be what we were originally designed to be.
Yeah, I was thinking of Colossians chapter 3 when you were talking about that. We're supposed to put off the old self with its practices and put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge after the image of its creator.
Mm-hmm.
So our foolish minds that have been darkened, they start to be restored through the gospel, through the scripture, and we're being conformed into the image of Christ.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
that's it.
I'm sure there's more that we could talk about, but I don't even know how long this thing is.
Pretty long, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's a good discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good discussion. Glad to sit down and talk to you about this. So next week,
whole sermon's on homosexuality.
Jay, you know that the Bible whispers about that, so we should whisper about things.
I think I'll probably go back and listen to that J.D. Greer sermon.
Oh, yeah?
I'm going to exegete this passage and get my outline and do all that stuff. And then I want to go back and listen to that. Because I remember I assigned that to guys that were kind of going through elder training stuff, and none of them outlined the passage like he did or even talked about anything like he talked about. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, if you do that, you already have your illustrations there. You can just pull those from J.D. Greer. And
yeah, right.
If we hear you talk about driver's ed, Jay, we'll know.
Yeah.
We'll know. All right. Well, this is the big one, right? The next one's the big one that everyone always thinks is controversial because of people like J.D. Greer.
I guess so. Yeah.
But I'm sure that you're going to explain it in a way that we'll be able to see it right from the text.
I mean, it's just there for anybody to read. It's
yeah.
Self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Almost.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully this has been beneficial. If it has, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And we will be here, Lord willing, for Free for All Friday. Until then, we hope that the discussion today helps you to become more and more conformed to the image of Christ. We'll see you later.